My husband snatched my wig off at the gala. 5 minutes later he was begging me for his job back. The first thing I heard was laughter. Not the warm kind. Not the kind that wraps around you at a family dinner or follows a good joke between friends. This laughter cut through the ballroom like broken glass. And in the center of it all stood my husband, Daniel, holding my wig in his hand. The chandeliers above us sparkled against crystal glasses and polished marble floors. Women in silk gowns stared at me with wide eyes. Men in tuxedos awkwardly looked away. Somewhere near the orchestra stage, a violinist stopped playing mid-note. Daniel grinned like he'd just won a game. "Ladies and gentlemen," he slurred, lifting the wig higher, "meet the real Vanessa." My scalp burned under the bright lights. I froze. For 3 years, I had worn wigs after chemotherapy took my hair. Even after remission, it never fully grew back. The patches, the scars, the insecurity, I carried them quietly. Most people never knew, but my husband knew. He had held me while I vomited after treatments. He had shaved the last strands when clumps began falling onto my pillow. He had promised me that I was beautiful no matter what. And now he stood in front of 400 people exposing the one thing I begged him to protect. The room fell silent except for Daniel's drunken chuckle. "You should see your faces," he said. "Relax. It's just hair." My chest tightened. I wanted to disappear. Across the ballroom, cameras flashed. This wasn't just any gala. It was the annual Harper Foundation charity event, one of the most publicized nights in Chicago. CEOs, journalists, investors, politicians, everyone important was here. And Daniel had humiliated me in front of all of them. I slowly reached for the wig in his hand. But before I could grab it, another voice thundered across the ballroom. "What the hell is going on here?" Every head turned. Standing near the entrance was Robert Sinclair, founder and CEO of Sinclair Technologies. Daniel's boss. The same man Daniel had spent 10 years trying to impress. Robert wasn't just wealthy, he was feared, a self-made billionaire known for his discipline, precision, and intolerance for public embarrassment. His sharp gray eyes moved from Daniel, to me, to the wig. The expression on his face changed instantly. Not anger, recognition. My stomach dropped, because Robert Sinclair knew exactly who I was. Daniel didn't. My husband had no idea that before cancer, before wigs, before the quiet life we built together, I had once worked beside Robert Sinclair himself. 10 years ago, I had been one of the youngest crisis management executives in the country. I built campaigns, repaired billion-dollar scandals, and helped save Sinclair Technologies during one of the worst PR disasters in its history. Robert used to call me, the woman who could stop fires with a sentence. Then I got sick. Everything changed after that. I left corporate life. I disappeared from public view. I chose peace over pressure. And eventually, I met Daniel. At first, he seemed kind. Different. He brought soup to my apartment when I was weak from treatment. He massaged my shoulders during sleepless nights. He made me laugh when I thought life was over. But somewhere along the way, kindness turned into resentment. Especially after he started climbing the corporate ladder. The promotions changed him. The money changed him. And tonight, alcohol revealed who he had truly become. Robert walked toward us slowly. The ballroom remained completely silent. "Daniel," he said carefully, "give your wife her wig back." Daniel blinked, still drunk enough to smile. "Relax, sir. We're just having fun." Robert's jaw tightened. "I said," he repeated, "give it back." Daniel finally handed it to me. My hands trembled as I placed it back on my head. I could barely breathe. Then Robert turned toward me, and his voice softened instantly. "Vanessa, are you all right?" A ripple spread through the crowd. Daniel's smile vanished. "You know my wife." Robert stared at him for a long moment. Then he said something that changed everything. "She's the reason your company still exists." Whispers exploded around the room. Daniel laughed nervously. "Okay, I definitely missed something here." But Robert wasn't joking. 10 years earlier, Sinclair Technologies faced a catastrophic lawsuit involving a defective medical device. Stock prices crashed overnight. Investors fled. News channels predicted bankruptcy. I was the strategist who rebuilt public trust. I worked 70-hour weeks while secretly attending chemotherapy appointments in between meetings. Nobody knew how sick I was back then, not even Robert. I saved the company, then quietly resigned months later when my health collapsed completely. Robert never forgot. You never told me this, Daniel whispered. I looked at him calmly. You never asked. His face paled. The room suddenly felt much smaller. Robert adjusted his cufflinks before speaking again. I invited Vanessa tonight personally. I hoped she might consider consulting for us again. Daniel stared at me in disbelief. You, what? I hadn't told him because I wasn't sure I wanted to return to that world. The gala was supposed to be a conversation. Nothing more. But Daniel's humiliation had turned it into something else entirely. Robert's eyes hardened as he faced him. And instead of supporting your wife, he said coldly, you publicly degraded her. Sir, I was joking. A joke. Robert stepped closer. My mother wore wigs after cancer treatment. Daniel went silent. Robert continued, quieter now. She spent years hiding because people made her feel ashamed. I watched her lose confidence piece by piece. He glanced toward me. No woman deserves that. The ballroom had become unbearably still. Then came the sentence Daniel never expected. Effective immediately, Robert said, you are suspended pending HR review. Daniel's face drained of color. Sir, please. You embarrassed your wife publicly at a charity event while representing this company. I was drunk. That explains it, Robert replied. It does not excuse it. Daniel turned toward me desperately. Vanessa, please say something. I looked at the man I once loved. Really looked at him. Not the version from years ago who held my hand in hospital rooms. Not the version who cried when my scans came back clear. The man standing before me now cared more about his career than the pain he caused. And somehow, that realization hurt more than the humiliation itself. You didn't pull off my wig tonight, I said quietly. He frowned. You pulled off the mask I kept putting over this marriage. His lips parted, but no words came out. I walked away before he could answer. Outside, cold Chicago air hit my skin. I stood near the fountain entrance trying not to cry. But tears came anyway. Not because of the wig. Not because of the crowd. Because I finally understood how long I had been shrinking myself to protect someone else's ego. A few minutes later, the ballroom doors opened behind me. I expected Daniel. Instead, I saw an older black woman in a navy blue gown slowly approaching with a cane. Her silver earrings glimmered under the lights. I hope you don't mind me coming over, she said gently. I recognized her immediately. Elaine Sinclair, Robert's mother. I straightened quickly. Mrs. Sinclair. Oh, honey, she said softly. Don't stand up for me. Before I could respond, she reached up and adjusted my wig slightly near the temple with astonishing tenderness. You look beautiful. My throat tightened instantly. Elaine smiled sadly. I wore wigs for 15 years. I blinked. Robert told me what happened inside. She sighed. People think cancer only takes hair. But sometimes it takes identity too. The words pierced straight through me. Because she understood. Not the physical pain. The loneliness afterward. The fear of mirrors. The pity in people's eyes. The exhaustion of pretending confidence every single day. Elaine sat beside me near the fountain. You know, she said, after my treatment, I stopped attending public events. I thought everyone was staring at me. I listened quietly. Then one day, a little girl in a grocery store looked at me and said, you look like a queen. She laughed softly. Children see hearts before appearances. For the first time that night, I smiled. Elaine reached into her purse and handed me a folded card. What's this? A support foundation. I opened it slowly. The Grace Again Initiative, a nonprofit organization that provided free wigs, counseling, and recovery support for women battling cancer. My eyes widened. You started this. With Robert, she said proudly. But we've struggled expanding nationally. I stared at the card. Then at her. And suddenly, something inside me shifted. For years I had hidden from the world. Maybe not physically, but emotionally. I avoided interviews, declined speaking opportunities, turned down leadership roles, stayed invisible. Cancer survived me, but fear had imprisoned me afterward. Elaine touched my hand gently. Women need someone who understands what survival really costs. Her words stayed with me. 5 minutes later, the ballroom doors burst open again. This time it was Daniel. His tie hung loose. His face looked panicked. Vanessa. I stood slowly. He rushed toward me. Please, he begged, ignoring Elaine completely. I'm sorry. I messed up. I crossed my arms silently. I can fix this, he said quickly. I'll apologize publicly. I'll do anything. You should have thought about that before humiliating me. I was drunk. No, I said calmly. You were honest. He flinched. Then his voice cracked. If I lose this job, I lose everything. There it was. Not, I'm sorry I hurt you. Not, I'm sorry I betrayed your trust. His greatest fear was losing status. Losing power. Losing income. Elaine watched quietly beside me. Daniel finally noticed her and straightened awkwardly. Mrs. Sinclair, I deeply apologize. She gave a small nod but said nothing. Then Daniel turned back toward me, eyes desperate. Please talk to Robert for me. The irony nearly broke my heart. Minutes earlier, he had reduced me to a punchline in front of strangers. Now he needed my influence to save him. I looked at him for a long moment. Then I asked softly, do you know what hurt most tonight? He swallowed hard. The wig. No. I stepped closer. It was realizing the man who once protected my insecurities became the person exploiting them. His eyes filled with tears. And for a second, I saw genuine shame. Not fear. Not manipulation. Actual shame. I don't know when I became this person, he whispered. Neither did I. But somewhere between ambition and ego, he had lost himself. The silence stretched between us. Finally, I sighed. I won't beg Robert to reverse his decision. Daniel lowered his head. But, I continued, I also won't destroy your future over one terrible moment. Hope flickered across his face. I turned toward Elaine. Would you excuse us for a second? She smiled knowingly and stepped away. Daniel looked at me, anxiously. You're helping me. I'm giving you a chance to help yourself. He blinked. You need therapy, Daniel. Not another promotion. His eyes watered again. You think I can change? I think people change when losing something finally hurts enough. For the first time all night, he said nothing. No excuses. No defensiveness. Just silence. And maybe that silence mattered more than any apology. The next morning, my phone exploded with messages. Videos from the gala had gone viral overnight. Millions of views. Comments flooded every platform. Some were cruel, but most weren't. Women from around the world shared their own stories. Hair loss, cancer, autoimmune diseases, alopecia, shame, survival. One message simply read, "Thank you for standing there with dignity when many of us would have shattered." I cried reading that. By afternoon, 3 major networks requested interviews. I declined all of them. But one call caught my attention. Elaine, Robert and I were talking, she said warmly. We'd like to formally invite you to lead Grace again nationally. I sat silently. You'd help thousands of women, she continued. Maybe millions someday. My chest tightened. Years ago, success meant titles and boardrooms. Now success suddenly looked different. Healing people, restoring confidence, making sure no woman felt ashamed for surviving. When do we start? I asked. Elaine laughed joyfully. That's the Vanessa Harper I remember. Over the next 6 months, my life transformed completely. Grace again expanded across 23 states. We partnered with hospitals in Chicago, Toronto, London, and Atlanta. Women received free custom wigs, therapy sessions, makeup support, and career counseling after treatment. But most importantly, they found community. I met mothers terrified their children wouldn't recognize them after chemo. Teenagers refusing to leave their bedrooms. Women abandoned by partners after illness changed their appearance. And every time I shared my own story, I watched shame loosen its grip on someone else. One afternoon, during a workshop in Boston, a young woman removed her scarf publicly for the first time in 2 years. Everyone in the room applauded. She sobbed into my arms afterward. I thought I was ugly, she whispered. I held her tightly. You survived, I said. That's never ugly. Months later, Daniel called me. By then, we had separated peacefully. He had entered therapy voluntarily and started attending addiction counseling too. I got a new job, he said quietly over the phone. That's good. I wanted to thank you. I leaned back silently. You could have ruined me, he continued. Instead, you forced me to face myself. I closed my eyes briefly. Growth rarely comes from comfort. Sometimes it arrives through humiliation, loss, consequences, and sometimes the kindest thing you can do for someone is stop protecting them from themselves. Before hanging up, Daniel asked one final question. Do you think people deserve second chances? I looked out my office window where dozens of women laughed together in the Grace Again courtyard below. Women once convinced their lives were over. Women rebuilding themselves every day. Yes, I answered softly. But only if they're willing to become someone different. After the call ended, I stood there quietly for a moment. Then I reached up slowly and removed my wig, not because I had to, because I no longer needed to hide.